All right, and welcome back. Now it's time for us to get into the political segment. Today being the Tuesday, it's people and politics. And I want to talk about the issue of NGCDF and the government debacle. Remember, there is that report by the Auditor General that it should be taken back to the Ministry of Education. That is really what I want to talk about today. I don't know what is your opinion on this, because many people will say it should remain in the hands of politicians. At the same time, some would say it should be going back to the Ministry of Education. So let's talk about that and really understand. And my guest already in studio, Kevin Osido, came a bit early and already he has his cup of tea. Ahead of everyone.
So what does that mean, Victor? We have cups, everyone will get his and hers.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So do I pass over this?
No.
Is there
I'll serve them.
Is there room for a second helping?
No, I will do this.
But can I add more to my...
Yes, I can add you. You want?
No, never mind. Is it half empty or half full?
Whichever way you look at it.
Should be half full.
Right.
Optimism.
You're right.
Niongeze tafadhali now.
I will add you there. There is that aspect. Kevin Osido is the executive director of the County Governors Watch.
Yes.
That debate to do with the NGCDF. What do you make of that?
Shukran.
What do you make of that, Kevin?
So in my view, really particularly when we talk about NGCDF,
yes,
in full is National Government Constituency Development Fund.
Right.
And so this therefore looks at probably development programs and projects within the constituencies, which somehow tends to, in my view, take away certain powers,
yes,
that are given to both the county governments and also to the national government ministries, departments, and agencies.
Yes.
Particularly looking at the roles of members of parliament, while also focusing on Schedule 4, on functions of both national and county governments. Of course, taking note of the fact that there are things that that NGCDF cannot do.
Yes.
And that it was envisioned that, for example, NGCDF would only deal with issues to have probably issues to do with school bursaries,
yes,
issues to do with security, and also issues that have got to do with improvement, yes, of infrastructure. So that, for example, you look at schools beyond the physical infrastructure, like putting fences and building classrooms, you look at bursaries. But then the question that begs, in my view, is where is the accountability mechanism?
That is the question being raised even by the Auditor General. Accountability.
Yeah.
Right. Wakili, what do you think of that statement?
When we actually share most of the views that have been raised. However, I'd like to maybe also focus and focus on the role,
yes,
of the NGCDF, which addresses the question of poverty and bringing development to the constituencies.
Yes.
The big question that begs is, how are we ensuring that this fund is actually managed properly? The same question that is actually raised by the Auditor General.
Yes.
Yes.
The accountability aspect. But Wakili George, when you look at even how politicians are running with it, some would argue that it's working pretty fine for them. Certain constituencies are getting it right. But from the Auditor General report, many counties are not getting it right in terms of usage. They don't have letters of acknowledgement, letters of contracts, and what have you. So a lot of loopholes are in that. But then somebody will also argue that when it's taken back to the Ministry of Education, then there's that prudent use of that money. Would you support Ministry of Education, or it should remain in the hands of the politicians?
Well, I do think that the Constitution has partitioned roles. It's given the executive, which is basically notoriously looked at the presidency, its role. There is the legislative arm and also the judiciary. The most powerful of them all, I think, is the legislative arm, which then is a check of the executive against any excesses. When you do that, you don't expect the role of the legislature, which is basically to make laws. It's to oversight and also, of course, representation because they're elected to the House to represent. Those then cannot go beyond the boundaries set out by the Constitution, either expressly or impliedly, to get involved into matters of the actual appropriation and expenditure.
Yes.
That is left to administration, executive, or whatever institution that have been created. Now, the creation of such an institution was deliberate, and in fact, it's part of the journey upon which we've devolved, because we started with the constituency fund oriented towards, developing with participatory inclusion of the mass.
Yes.
And of course, to set out, even at the minimum level, infrastructure that is personalized to the people, to reach the people and serve the people. But then eventually, of course, we expanded the devolution towards what we have now, that are counties. Accountability is a constant threat to the gains or would-be gains of devolution and eventually development in the country, on account of the fact that the fund that is devolved for use ordinarily is supposed to be for intended budgeted and therefore legislated issues. Because our budget is a legislation process too. So when you legislate to build, to develop, you've created a law that says that is how the appropriation of the funds that have been collected from the public in a fund, largely the consolidated fund, is supposed to be used. That's accountability. And it's a very, ordinarily, it's a very simple issue. Unfortunately, human interference, human intervention is the concern. If there was no human intervention howsoever or whatsoever to use of funds, or you limit the contact of a human being to the funds that are collected as tax, then that would be the ideal. But we have to remain in contact with the monies that we collect for purpose of developing our country. And then we create institutions, in fact, sometimes many institutions, so that if this institution is misappropriating, then the other probably will not misappropriate.
Yes.
But again, the problem is the general national psyche is that if you don't have, you'll one day have it, wait until you get into government or institution of government, then there's potential of you having money if you join government, because the institutions there will have money that have been donated by the people.
Yes.
At least that seems to be one orientation on how people get or glorified to get money into their pockets.
When we have money, this is a question, what you've said, it's not a problem having money. Once you're in the government, there's availability of funds. But then the usage is in question here. When you look at the auditor's report, for example, Kevin, there is so much that is flying around, cannot be supported, cannot be found. There are no correspondences based on what is on the ground. But when you look at the usage, some of the contracts are actually, some of the projects are completed.
Yeah.
But ukienda kwa ground, vitu ni tofauti completely. You know?
And I think in addition to what Wakili Kithi is saying, is the blatant lack of the beneficiaries' involvement. So that, for example, when you have the board at the constituency level meeting, who are these people? Where do they come from? Which sectors do they represent? And for the sake of accountability, have they been taken through basic minimum processes of, for example, auditing a government project or just a development project?
Yes.
The planning process. For instance, under the Public Finance Management Act, what we see with county governments is that a basic requirement is, for example, a bill of quantities. So you want to put up a school. Do you have a BQ? Who has agreed on this BQ?
Yes.
When you are sourcing for contractors, the PFM Act, the Public Procurement Act requires that you, for example, advertise and give people time to apply. And even before you advertise, you agree on what you are looking for. So you want, for example, somebody to come and put up, a water project or to dig a borehole, What are the requirements? So when people ultimately submit their portfolios or profiles or their CVs, who agrees on who gets this job?
Yes.
And what is this process? So if you look at ultimately how, therefore, the auditor, a general would say that there are projects in paper but they are not on the ground. It means that the people who live around where we are saying these projects should have or ought to have been built were not aware, and that only a few people who probably were compromised, or by practice, what we see is that the campaign manager of the MP is the one who becomes, for example, the chair of the CDF board at the constituency level. Because now again, the role of the MP is questioned. Of course, some of them say that they are patrons, and so you ask yourself, what is the role of the patron at that level? What is their level of engagement? So it would be important that the members of this board, and largely the beneficiaries, the citizens, in counties and the procurement process, we also expect something called a service charter, which is a board that is blasted in an open place. So you say, we want to build a road from Missouri to Kombewa, and that this road will take this amount of money. The contractor is so and so. The contact of the contractor is so and so, and that it will begin on this date and end on this day. But you see, these things are not put out there because at the point of deciding which project we want to do and where we want to do it, the citizens are locked out.
Could this
they
be
are left out
deliberate?
of this. Of course it is. It is deliberate. And if you look at the figures that the Auditor General is mentioning, for example, that a school program in one of the constituencies, I think is Bomachoge, they can't raise 86 million. Now, Victor, look at 86 million and what it can do in a small area like Bomachoge, and what that would really mean in terms of transforming the lives of the people. So if we look at those kind of figures and what then the expectations of the citizens are against what people are going through, the poverty levels, the suffering of Kenyans, and you are an elected member who is saying, we have this amount of money, at the same time we have a county government that is also saying, we have a budget that is supposed to help us deal with some of these issues. Then you have national government ministries, departments, and even agencies. And in many places, we have also seen the president during his tours making promises. And most of those promises are largely attached to resources, financial resources. So you ask yourself, where are we losing it and what must we be able to do? So in my view, it is an improper, injudicious use and management of resources, that looking at the kind of trajectory where we are coming from the court rulings, for example, in 2013, the amendments that were made in 2022 and 2023 on the NGCDF Act of 2013, then 2015, and the one that we are currently operating on, there are gaps that, in my view, need to be fixed, and that it is important, and that we listen to sane voices like those of the Controller of Budget, the Auditor General, and much more fundamentally what, for example, County Governance Watch, among other organizations, do, which is on citizen agency and accountability. The citizens must be taken through a capacity building process and a very deliberate mechanism to ensure that they're empowered to also raise very critical questions. So that, for example, Victor, what we do as an organization, in partnership with the Office of the Auditor General and that of the Controller of Budget and EACC. 2 weeks ago, for example, we were in Kisumu, and we had a meeting with over 120 people from citizens, including the County Assembly, and we were looking at the Controller of Budget's reports, the Auditor General's reports, and we were asking citizens, these things that are posted on our, about our county, do you believe them if they say this market has been built out of this amount of money? And people raised so many fundamental questions. And so from there, if you look at how citizens now begin to take, responsibility around accountability and what needs to be done, that, in my view, really needs to cement how, therefore, we engage with the development projects, and especially where monies are concerned.
Thank you. And when you listen to all this, when the intention and the purpose of having these funds was purely for all good intentions. But now, what is now coming out to be, it has turned out to be something else. 86 million shillings not accounted for. When you go to, again, is it called Lafay constituency, in that report again, 56 million shillings. The figures are just, huge, for lack of a better word. So the framers of the Constitution, who intended these funds to be there, had all the good intentions, but now the usage. Where's the missing link?
There's a point that my senior here in the profession mentioned, and there's always this idea, or rather a perception, that once you join government, you'll be able to make money. I think we have seen concerns raised surrounding the NGCDF, in the sense that the members, the parliamentarians, have actually also taken up the role of the contractors. So that also creates a huge gap, because some of the projects that are actually being funded and implemented by this fund are short-term, others are medium, others are long-term. So when you realize that there's a very big gap with the oversight, because from the moment these, which actually the legality surrounding the NGCDF is also in question, which we understand is currently in court. So when we introspect why it was created and for what purposes and the people that are involved, you will be able to see that there's a very huge gap, because the letter and the spirit for which it was created for is so different from what is happening. And we have so many examples. Essentially, it's more or less like most funds in government, where they are meant for a certain purpose, but they're used in a completely different way, which I think also calls us as Kenyans to introspect further as we put these people in office. Because what the independent office of the Auditor General is doing is showing the rot that is actually within this government or any other government. And when we actually go deeper into it, we are able to see it actually just comes to people not doing what they're supposed to do. Because if that fund goes into building schools, then we won't be having this kind of gap. If the oversight bodies that are supposed to look and check into how this fund is actually taken, used up, then we'll be able to see that it's what people should be doing that they are not doing. It's just pilfering money and enriching themselves. We cannot explain how 86 million cannot be traced.
It cannot be accounted for.
And it's not a single man job. It's several people who have come together, created a project, and funds have been allocated, and there is nothing on the ground.
Allow me to ask this question. What will be the biggest danger if it's reverted back to the Ministry of Education? Wakili, if it's, the case says, or the court says that, it should be under the Ministry of Education, what will be the biggest danger? Or
there's
none?
There's no danger at all. In fact, the fact that it's being opposed by those who are benefiting is what is dangerous to the public. I'll tell you this, it's been abused. I will give you examples of an experience I've handled, which I can't reveal beyond that statement, is that there is, and please allow me to be blatant. I know I'm on air.
Go ahead.
But there's bursary for sex. There's bursary that is being given, but women have to give up and yield into the demands of either those are in office of the Member of Parliament or the Member of Parliament himself, abusing women in order to advance bursaries to them. Some of them we've handled ourselves. So why do we have it? And let me put it this way. There are two issues I'm going to raise. One is that the Auditor's General Office and the law surrounding the whole proportion of the auditor's work is incomplete. When you generate a piece of investigation, what is it for? When this DCI investigates, he prosecutes. When the Auditor General investigates, because that's an investigation and oversight role that the Auditor General then does, the Auditor General then submits that report to would-be authorities for action. They have no emotional attachment to the outcome of that investigation. Number two is then they forward the report to the people that could be accused within the report, meaning senators and members of parliament. Then they conspire so that that report is not debated and the outcome is shut on account of the interest that Parliament has. I have taken governors, members of Parliament, or whoever it is, some to court to defend them, some of course to appear before some of these committees. Those committees are not functional. And by the way, it's all, again, it's cyclic because it's a money-making forum where you're going to defend an accusatory auditor's report against you. So it's a forum where then money gets exchanged for purpose of a good outcome for whoever is going to probably progress the audit report through legislative or oversight role. Why is it that the DCI investigates and prosecutes, the Auditor General merely investigates, and there's no attachment of a progressive path upon which then somebody can prosecute? Number two, it's the procurement process. You know, procurement, there's a lot of interference with the human attachment to the process. At KRA, for instance, when you want to make a transaction now, I'm talking about now, and you submit a query or you submit your documents, it's not allocated to anyone by human interference. There's a round-robin way in which the job that you're asking is allocated on the other side. The task is allocated randomly. So it can't be that I have a brother working at KRA, then it lands on that brother, unless it's by sheer luck. Okay? So why can't we have a pool of will be eligible service providers? Then it is you pay for the region that you want to work. For instance, I would want to work in Nairobi. You pay a certain fee depending on the economy of Nairobi, and in Nakuru and in Mombasa. When I want to build, I get allocated work randomly by a certain application of science. So that then the discomfort there will be that I don't have to pay anything to anyone to get the job. And therefore I'm beholden to the job and to the Kenyans, as opposed to you give me work, I give you 10% of will be the amount. You want to pay me, you give me 10% of will be the payment. And eventually, therefore, I have to inflate the bill to take people's money because I have to pay some. And therefore, even at budgeting level, we have to keep on seeing that there's an amount that is added on the bill of quantities for purposes then inflated of procuring the job. You inflate, and it doesn't make sense. And the problem we have for all this is because there's a hand of man at every instance where money is involved. And when you want to legislate against it, of course, members of Parliament will refuse.
Are the characters consistent?
Yes.
Inflation of figures?
Yes, it is everywhere.
It
is everywhere. Let me tell you, if you do not do it, you do not get the job. If you don't give the 10%, you do not get the job. Give me one contractor who doesn't do that. One. And gets the job consistently, and therefore his life is okay. He doesn't give the 10%. Who is that? When at payment and at procurement, who is that person? Who is it? There's nobody. The members of Parliament, they says, they are the ones bringing desks to primary schools. They are the ones who are constructing classrooms, and they are ones who inflate so that they have campaign money. They use this kitty for purpose of campaigns. And you see, they fight over it. The other day in Parliament, we saw how they are saying, you've developed your constituency or your sub-county this much, and yet we give this much. Where do you get the money? It means you steal from the kitty. And therefore, they know their limits, but also they legislate and they fight for the fund to continue to be a constant for the administration, because that's where otherwise they don't have money. Let me tell you, members of Parliament don't have enough money. They don't. But they'll get enough money when they get into such activities and administrate on the procurement, and eventually they deliver the goods and inflate, and the money gets back to them.
Let's take a break. George Kithi, Warimu Gatacha, and Kevin Osido. Should the NGCDF, all the bursaries, be taken back to the constituency or to the Ministry of Education? Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. All right, you as a citizen, you have benefited. Some of us benefit from help, a lot, help. But then now, even the issue of help has also been, there's also been an issue about it. And now the Let me just take you back shortly. The High Court said that the NGCDF Act of 2015 violated the principle of separation of powers. The Act 2015 was amended in 2022 and 2023 in an apparent bid to beat a similar declaration of a 2013 Act. That suffered a similar fate with unsuccessful appeals at the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. Okay, so it means that this case has been in court for a very long time. And Kevin, when you look at this, the legality of this fund is in question. Then why is it stuck where it is?
Victor, it has to be stuck there because of legislative processes. And when we began, we all agreed that part of the challenges that NGCDF is facing is the challenge of the doctrine of separation of powers, where you cannot be the person to make the law, and then you want to implement the law and also to adjudicate how that law is supposed to be applied.
Yes.
And that is hence the attempts by MPs, National Assembly, to amend the 2013 Act and the 2015 Act. Because, of course, the court will make certain pronouncements, and then you rush to fill in those gaps so that you are safe and secure. And as Wakili rightfully said, is politics of NGCDF and NGCDF in politics. So that we look at what must we do to delink the politicians from it. Let the National Assembly representatives make the law on how the CDF through the NGCDF Act is supposed to be implemented. Then you get out of that room and allow the actors to do their work. It also bolsters your power, particularly on accountability, so that when you receive petitions and letters of question from from the people that you represent, your voters, it gives you a lot of power and authority to want to ask them, why are these people saying they have not gotten bursaries? Yet we already have a budget which has been appropriated from National Assembly, and as an MP, I know how much there is in the constituency. As it is right now, members of Parliament, National Assembly cannot ask those questions because they are part and parcel of that play. And it's a play that, in my view, therefore, as the court rightfully says, really needs to be relooked at. What must we do? And in my view, engaging with some of these processes is get off the parliamentarians from this process. And it is a basic question by the Victor.
If you just expunge bursaries and you leave CDF?
It's not possible. Why is it not possible? Because of affirmative action. Bursaries form, actually the bigger budget of NGCDF is education bursaries. If you go back to this constitution and you look at Schedule 4, so what kind of education is devolved and what is a national government? Hence the question around governors and MPs and all this, because at the county level, you're talking about early childhood education. So governors and their officers in the county budget,
and they also want that kitty, that money for them.
Is because of the politics. So at the county level is only for ECD. The mwananchi there who is benefiting from bursary will not know ni ya mheshimiwa yupi amenipa hii bursary. When the moment comes for politics, the MP stands and says, I have given you people bursaries. It is a war between the governor, the senator, the MCA, and the MPs. Because therefore, and if you look at the trend, many MPs want to be senators. Some senators want to be governors. And the anchor line they are using, the bio is, nimewapea nini? CDF. So when George talks about the sex in CDF or sex in NGCDF, whatever angle it is, that is just one bit of it. But there is also the story around accountability where when some of these people sit, they even ask for the list of voters. So which ward gave us the highest number of votes? Which constituency? So out of the 17. So that is how you agree on who gets the bursary. And hence the reason as to why the auditor is saying we cannot trace some of these monies. Because the moment the paperwork is there, chances that it will fall in somebody's hand who will get a lawyer friend of his or hers to go to court are very high. And then the other bit of it, of course, is the lack of accountability. We have not seen very progressive prosecutions of members of National Assembly, particularly when it comes to financial
But because they'll say
dealings.
there's a board, they are not directly involved.
And that is why the matter is in court, and they keep amending the recommendations of the court, so that when you are supposed to be delinked from the board, you say, okay, I'm not the chairman as an MP, now I am the patron.
Okay, so when you listen to that,
yeah.
Of course there is the legality aspect of it. Mwananchi is left hanging. Of the other question of public participation or awareness on where the money is coming from and the intended purpose. Do you think Mwananchi is also not getting the right information?
It is very possible. But I think now there is a lot of information that is in the public domain that maybe previously was just a reserve of a few people that held certain offices. It is very possible. However, I think what we are looking at is a question of conflict of interest because the parliamentarians or the people that are trying to handle this fund for their own benefits are actually in a position where they are going to benefit from, they are actually going to benefit from this fund. And as we have heard, there are very serious concerns that have been raised surrounding this fund. A fund that is legally that is legally owed, like it needs to go down to these people, that now the women have to do a certain thing for them to get it. You see a question of, for me to be able to give you bursaries, then you have to sing a certain tune to my politics. The problem is that we politicize a lot of issues. Unfortunately, we are even politicizing education, which is a very, very dangerous path to take, because in the event that we want to politicize everything in the country, we should at least leave 3 particular areas free of politics. That is first the education of our children, the health care, and security. Because the impact or the damage that is done cannot be reversed. So for me, I am very keen on also public participation. Public participation should not be an illusion. It is real, and it is 100% the prerogative of the government to involve the public so that they understand. Because it cannot be imagined, it has to be done.
Yes.
And when we are talking about public participation, other than just this, there are so many other areas where Kenyans are actually called to actively get involved. And it's not, the onus is not on them, the onus is on the government. So I feel like there's a very huge a very huge gap, but there is a very big need for us to separate the politicians and this fund. So maybe the best thing will be to have the Ministry of Education handle this fund.
Yeah.
Yes, that way we'll have cured a lot of confusion. Yeah.
But by then, Victor, before Akili probably comes in,
yes,
there's a question you raised around the role of the Minister of Education. And in my view, I do not think that the ministry really needs to come in as a fund manager or a sole quote-unquote proprietor of this fund. Because if you look at what NGCDF is supposed to do, as we said earlier on, focusing on education issues, infrastructure, security, and now bursaries, NGCDF also cross-cuts in a number of other sectors. For example, health, security, which is not devolved. Of course, there are mechanisms to ensure that county governments also engage in the security aspect of it. So my question probably would be, what would be the role of the ministry? Because therefore, the ministry needs to be very strong in terms of cementing or developing a partnership with NGCDF, both the board at the national level and also at the constituency level, so that this question around accountability and where we are saying who is going to oversight over the oversighter, then the ministry, through its officials, can be given a place or a chair within that decision-making room. So that when we say we have a list of 74 applicants for bursary, by the time the last signature is made, where the checks probably are written against the names,
yes,
the Minister of Education officer needs to be involved. Now, that is somebody that we can say is PNP, and therefore the accountability levels are quite high. Because if you say the questions that Madam Nancy are raising, where are the minutes? Where are the, then the regional director of education or the county director of education can say, this meeting I didn't attend or I was not invited. And this invitation must be in writing, so that the person, the chair of the NGCDF board at that level, writes a letter with a clear agenda. And he or she is saying, on this day, at this venue, we will be discussing, for example, criteria of allocation of CDF bursaries. We have received these applications.
Okay.
By the time now the documents are required, we go back to this oversighter and ask, how come there are no documentations, yet you must be or you should be part and parcel of this board?
That's a very salient point. But Wakili, when you come at that case of amalgamating all the funds, consolidating the funds, and that's a case which is still active actually, there is that call. Would it be effective?
Yes, it would, but not the ultimate. Let me ask a question, just by sheer reckless thought, because I'll call it reckless because it won't be very popular. Why do we need bursaries?
That's a disclaimer.
Why do we need bursaries?
Okay.
Because, look, I'm the government.
Right.
I plan education. Then I set aside money to come and fund the education. Does it even make sense? That I'm the government, the cost of education is this much. So that
nationally?
Yeah, nationally. Then I remove my money, I move the money that we've been given as a government, as a corporate entity called government. And I've budgeted here, but I remove money to come and fund myself for the same education. Why does it even make sense? And then that money, between that journey of giving it to someone else to come back and fund me, it's get misappropriated. Why does it even happen? Look, if I'm the government, the cost of education is this much, so that there are students who won't be able to go to school if I don't give this money to Member of Parliament to come and give it to me again through the schools. Why can't I simply say, this is the cost of education, I'm not giving any bursaries, but the education will be free. Then there's nobody to bursary around.
Right, right.
So why are we creating a very complicated process where I'm here, I'm budgeting, right? I'm the government, I'm budgeting, and we are saying this. 9 billion or 19 billion will go to the bursary kit, whatever amount it is, right? That amount will still come back and fund the same education that I'm legislating on. I'm struggling to have every child be educated. Why can't they do everything? And say this, the bursary kitty, if put together in the implementation of the education funding process in the country, including every other expense, reduces the cost of education to this much. And therefore, education is free. By the way, if education is free, there won't be this rot. That won't be what we're discussing here, because it is free. Now, because it is not free, there's a commercial aspect to it, a very complicated commercial aspect. And therefore, we are funding all this because we are going on a round robin of sorts. Why would, assuming it was my own personal company, okay, and I want to fund a purchase of a tool of trade for my company, but then I take my money, give it to X, to come and fund me again? I mean, does it even make sense? So what is then the rationale of having bursary today if we can directly fund it from the exchequer directly to where it's supposed to be? If we're supposed to pay school fees for students, these schools are paid to who? Is it a private entity or something? The government should fund education totally, and then it should be free. If we made it free, and let me tell you, we have enough resources to make it free because we've tried to make it free before.
You know, it is not new, Wakili, because I'm looking at the figures here and even some of the history. In March 2024, 28th of March 2024, that is last year, bursary billions wasted on academic flops, according to the Auditor General. Last year, 1 year down the line, we are still talking about the same. And on that report, there were recommendations, again, to reverse this money based on what you're saying, the consolidated fund, you know, to make education free of charge.
Yes.
Free for all.
Yeah.
But that's not been affected. I mean, 1 year down the line, the same report is like it was copy-paste and say this is the same report.
Let me add you, if we had a kitty to fund education other than the direct funding of education, then I tell my people, go to Makueni or whichever sub-county or county and benchmark. Why would money supposed to pay for bursaries be benchmarking on how to pay for bursaries? I mean, does it make sense? So the point is, by creating these layers of advancement of bursary to come and fund the same thing that we are budgeting to fund, it is itself an avenue to corrupt the system. It is. We do not need all this institution called bursary thing. In fact, we should just fund education and say it is free. Whatever price we pay to make education free, available for everyone, yes. I think that's the ultimate price we should pay. Then, and I would be happy if I was told, you are paying these taxes because education is free. We would be agreeable to that, because then the cost of education has been removed from us. And therefore, the rationale behind, but whatever it was then, does not subsist and is not consistent with whatever it was then. It is very fashionable today, and I've seen it many times, where members of parliament even call the constituencies and say, and I see it in the newspapers, advertise, and say, check bursary, check for bursary or bursary allocation day or something, and it's a ceremony. They cook, they feed them, and they give them 5,000.
Yes.
And in the process, somebody leaves his home, pays 1,000 to come and take a check of 5,000, meaning 4,000 is already unutilized, or the sheer loss of the whole process. I mean, cooking food for people to give them checks so that there's an optical value to it, it doesn't make sense, but it happens.
We love food, Wakili.
Victor, we need the... Yes.
Even on the same breath, because even in January, remember there was a case by the... that is the county, the governors, where they are also acting and say that they also want that bursary in the county level. And they argue that case on the social protection mandate in the constitution. So you have the constituencies issuing bursaries, the counties also issuing bursaries, but we're looking at the big boy here, the national government, which says also that, this mandate belongs to the national government, duplication of roles.
Precisely, and I was just about to say that, and I think you probably read my mind, that we need a session to underscore when we talk about the education budget of the Republic of Kenya. What is it and what is it for? So in terms of the how much and where does the much go to? Because even as we talk about bursaries right now, we still have issues with the junior secondary schools, where we have kids in school, some of them are actually learning under trees, against budgets of the government through the Ministry of Education on promises to be able to put classrooms and even to bolster, or rather to provide equipment for laboratories. Now, it is important that we balance this pendulum, because otherwise we will be having very many people in schools in terms of the quantity. So bursaries are churning people to go to school, but the quality in terms of what they are benefiting or getting. So you have a class of 140. I visited a school in one of these public schools that has 140 learners. So you ask yourself, really, is it even, does it make sense? And this is largely because of, again, going back to politicization of the bursaries. So if we can be able to agree that education is free, so what bit of this education is free? Because in this country, we still have schools that are actually cooking for learners. So they are not going to school. And part of the reason why even the parents will tell you, mtoto wangu anaenda kwa hiyo shule sababu ya chakula. Sasa akishaenda asubuhi apewe ile uji ya saa 4, angoje tena apewe lunch at home, that budget is taken away from them, which is largely the driver of most of these families and the bursaries. So, and we need to also underscore that indeed, the history of bursaries, beyond the politicization of the fund itself, has helped many families. Children have gone out there because of bursaries. People would never have even stepped into school. If we can be able to take away the politicians from bursaries and adhere to the court rulings and the recommendations, by these courts.
For the sake of Mwananchi, who is not privy to the court ruling,
yes.
What are the recommendations?
So that, for example, one, we are saying that the separation of powers aspect, which is one of the discussions that we are also talking about here. Let the lawmaker make laws and support the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act to be as it's supposed to be, so that even members of the NGCDF board at the constituency level is not meant for the MP to be the one nominating and vetting and writing a letter to appoint them. Hata mimi nimepata simu mbili just this year to be appointed into a board, and I ask myself...
The Ministry of Education has the data of all students, from the one who was admitted in January to the one who is exiting this year.
Yes.
Where does a member of parliament come in between a student and the Ministry of Education to offer me a bursary, and yet the Ministry of Education has my data from kindergarten to when I'm done with my master's and PhD and everything else?
The member of parliament should not at any given point come in. The only responsibility should be at the appropriation, the budget making process at the National Assembly. Waziri wa elimu anasoma bajeti,
chukua hiyo.
We have appropriated this, then they go and sit. Even if they want to go to the education committee, wakae pale wajiulize, is this money enough to take this number of the data you are talking about against a number of schools that we are talking about? That should be the only role of the MP. So that, and hence the reason I was proposing earlier on, that as part of the recommendations to bring in the ministry, the Ministry of Education has personnel across this country, both at national and county level. You go to those places and unaambiwa kuna regional director of education who knows all his or her staff. There is county education officer. Let them be effectively involved with zero interference by the MP. Even the intimidation aspects, where you are given a call by an MP, unaulizwa, I thought my APA gave you a list. What has happened to 17 of those?
Let me ask, were you a beneficiary of help?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
It was a big issue, though. It was a big issue, though. But then when you look at the whole scenario, what would be your recommendation? The courts have given the pronouncement on it. There are so many acts, there are so many amendments here and there. But what would be the Mwananchi kind of solution to this?
At the very basic level, the Mwananchi needs to understand just how free is education, because you find that there are people that are still paying, I think, tuition. There is the cost that goes to the textbooks, which is a very hefty cost.
There's something called motivation fee or something.
You see, very funny fees that have been sneaked into the final amount. So how free is this education? These are some of the questions that the common Mwananchi, Wanjiko, Mora, and Anyango should ask the government during public participation. Just how free is this education? What is the government going to do that actually causes it to be called free? When they say it's free and it's compulsory, which is free and which is not compulsory? Very basic questions for the Kenyans to get answered. Then, of course, is to completely delink the members of parliament, the politicians from this fund, because that is the biggest problem that we have. Just making sure that theirs is to make laws, amend them, appropriate this amount for the budgeting, but beyond that, they will not go and have meetings with contractors where we will be agreeing on this 10%, will come back to me, will inflate it this much, this is how we are going to cook up the BQ. You know, there should be qualified persons who now, and there is a very good process of procurement of these services and contractors and all that. So I think if people were to do what they are supposed to do, it will be a very easy thing for us to actually benefit from it. Like Wakili said, if, for instance, education is free.
How free is it?
How free is it?
Okay. When you look at the DNA, Kithi, again, there's somebody who sent a message here. What the constitutional lawyer is saying is absolutely true. Masanga Athumani from Msamvian, is that Msamvian?
Must be Msambweni.
Kwale County tuned in.
Yep.
This Msambweni or something. So that message was sent around 20 minutes ago. But then now, what would be your, again, your kind of mwananchi solution to it? The controller budget most probably will come up with another audit report. If it's not acted upon, whatever the audit report has been, it's been coming year in, year out, year in, year out. Most probably there will be another report again. But what would be your mwananchi, not from the legal aspect, your own understanding, to solve this issue?
Kibaki was very successful in his education policy. Two things: fund education completely. That there is a reserve for the parental responsibilities. So make education absolutely free, so that the rich and the poor have the same platform upon which to learn and progress as students, same opportunities. Because there's an equal opportunity for education, has a reserve of a price to it. There are those that will meet the price and those that will not meet the price. When you do that, then give it a compellable duty for the actors on an individual child to take the child to school. The parent must take the child to school. If you don't, because it is free, then your reserve duty, and you fail in your reserve duty to take the child to school, to an institution, you shall be a criminal.
Yeah.
And you'll be punished for it.
Because it is free.
Yes, because it is free.
Yeah.
And number three, the Auditor General's report are complicated to the mwananchi. They are not broken into the thematic language. The language that then, that socializes the mwananchi to be able to digest and interpret the Auditor General's report. It is in a very complicated form at its reporting, yet it is meant to audit the money that the mwananchi has paid as taxes and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
The mwananchi should be told that there was a classroom here. It was not built. It's as simple as that, and yet the money that was given to the kit or to a member of parliament has disappeared. And then there is even an audit of the mwananchi on the member of parliament closer to the correct or the truth when the mwananchi is deciding to vote or not to vote again for that member of parliament. What is happening is, if the auditor's report is generated, and if you have money, and you can talk to the media, and you can talk to whoever it is and pay off so that it is not in the limelight, then you kill it. That's what governors are doing. That's what members of parliament are doing. And then the mwananchi won't know anything. How then do you participate as a mwananchi to be told, what do you want here? I want you to build a classroom. And then the member of parliament goes to allocate money for that classroom. And then when the classroom is not built, at least at the end of the financial year, I'm not told what happens to that classroom.
Yes.
And that disappears, and we go to another financial cycle.
This is a lighter note to all of you. What if that money is taken away from the legislators? What's the worst that can happen?
But it should.
Nothing.
It ought to be, because remember, I will tell you, it is unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional to allocate money to members of parliament, for members of parliament to utilize the money administratively, and then they come back to say, how has this money used?
Yes.
For instance, for example, parliament, I have used the money, supplied desks, and eaten part of it. Then there's a question in parliament, I must say this, how this money was used in the oversight role. I mean, that's impossible.
So what's the worst that could happen if it's taken away from them?
They become
Nothing.
poor.
Oh, wait.
Nothing will happen. Nobody will die.
They go broke. I think we were told that members of parliament don't have money. So I think if you remove that kitty, well, it's that money that they use.
You should, and I'm saying it here on air, you should see the payslip of member of parliament. It is true. They take the loans, the mortgage, and the car loan. It's done. I tell you, that's why they fight to increase them. Right now, they propose to increase their salaries, haven't they?
Right.
Haven't they? Because they don't have the money.
Silently, though. yes,
They have.
Yeah, so I think that the best thing that can happen to the future of NGCDF, especially speaking on issues to do with schools, because the fund is supposed to take care of so many other projects, but in terms of education, will be to completely depoliticize, if there's such a word, the entire process. Because people are looking at the fund as a way of enriching themselves at the expense of a student. And already, this is a country that is burdened with money that is owed.
Yeah.
We are burdened with money that we need to pay. The county governments have not even paid their workers. Then there are so many things to be done with this money, but they will choose to keep that very juicy and very nice kitty for their use, so that they can also mobilize voters here and there. I give you bursaries, I have done this and that and the other to you. And when you see how much money they are giving, it's 5,000 shillings. I mean,
it's so sad. I mean, you make it look so...
It is very sad.
And you see, Victor, that's why I was saying that we probably, depending on your planning, need another opportunity to deal with this issue of making education free.
Yes.
Because you have public, private, you also have the 5,000 as bursary, then you have ECD or county government, national government involvement. So there is a lot of confusion in terms of who is supposed to do what, who is usurping whose powers, who is not getting which money. And then we go now deeper into looking at the process of agreeing. Because I've sat in some committees, not as a committee member, but just as an observer, and I've seen how some very deliberately minded good citizens who are in the education bursary committees of these county governments really desire that people get the money and that money does what it is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So even as we talk about the Auditor General's and the Controller of Budgets reports on the negative ends, we also need to probably pronounce and profile the positive. And sometimes I ask myself, the other day I saw the Auditor General awarded Mheshimiwa Babu Owino, unless it was misquoted or it was wrongly reported. But what is it that Babu is doing, for example, with his constituents, is it Embakasi West, that gets it to a level where, East or West, where he is even awarded by the Auditor General? I see him a lot of times having the rallies that Wakili is talking about, and he's just saying, you know, mwaka huu so and so, and he's calling people by their names, and people wanashangilia, and it is a big public rally.
Yeah.
What is it that some MPs are doing that others are not doing, even as we continue to, because this war of bursaries is not going to end now. Even as we talk about court rulings, we talk about functions by the Constitution, it is the same thing we are facing with the MCAs and Ward Development Fund. It's a war that has been there since 2014. It is not starting now, it is not ending now. But even as we continue to fight, what are the best practices that we can be able to learn? What is the government's commitment
the good thing
to
is,
be able to provide?
We've spoken our mind, we've given our opinion, we've given our suggestion, and I believe somebody is going to listen to this. Thank you so much. I want to break some rule today. Wakili, what's on the front page of the Standard? The way we do it, just raise it up on the front page. Read it.
The General's last wish.
All right. That's General Ogola, right?
Yes, they talk about his last wish, his last journey, and how he left this world, and also he has a will that has been published. Some of the issues that he put in.
That's on the front page. The General's last wish. You can check that's on the front page of the Standard. On the front page of the Star newspaper, dilemma for Kalonzo as Uhuru backs Matiang'i's bid. That's on the front page of the Star newspaper. And finally, why is Kenya still in Haiti? Why is Kenya still in Haiti? Those are the front page of our local dailies. You can grab your favorite copy and read in details for yourself. Wakili George Kethi, an advocate of the High Court. Warimo Gatachi is also an advocate of the High Court, and Kevin Osido, who is the Executive Director, County Governors Watch. We've talked about education today. Hatujaongea siasa. Education is the equalizer. True or false?
Na siasa education.
That's just... Asante sana for watching. I'm Victor. Have a good day. Bye-bye.